Alright folks, and welcome back to Procreate. So this is going to be our lesson on blend modes. In this course, we're just going to cover the basics of blend modes. So I want to start off the course by talking about the three factors that influence your blend mode. The first one is the value of the layer. The second one is the position of the layer. And the third one is the desired behavior of the layer. Now, Jeremy, you're saying, what does the layer have to do with this? Blend modes tell the layer how to interact with the layer below it. So you have this file in your downloads. There's nothing you have to do right now. I just want to show you how this works. We come over to a layer, and let's say that we have this apple. We're going to move the apple underneath the orange, because you see the layers are stacked that way. And because the blend mode is similar, nothing is happening. It's fully opaque. But now let's go ahead and change the blend mode on the orange. Totally different behavior now that we change the blend mode. So blend modes have a direct effect on your artwork. All right, so let's go ahead now and change it back to normal. And let's grab my apple. And let's move the apple back over. Let's go ahead and move the orange while we're here so we don't have to do that later. All right, so that's what a blend mode is. Now, the first thing we talked about with blend modes is the value of the layer. You'll see down here, we have all sorts of gray circles. All colors have a value. If you were to take this red rectangle and you were to come over here and do a hue, saturation, brightness adjustment and desaturate it, you'll see that there is gray. So every color has a value, and some of this gray is going to be very similar toward the black end of the spectrum, and some is not. Okay, so you can go through with this color of gray, and it kind of matches what you would expect to see, say, oh, I don't know, probably right about here. Okay, let's go ahead and undo that saturation. Now, let's go ahead and do the same thing with the orange. Let's go ahead and desaturate the orange. Now, even the orange has a value of gray. Can you now go through and tie this orange up to one of these? I'd say you're probably very close to there. Okay, now let's go ahead and do the apple. And the apple, when we desaturate it, is going to be much darker. The apple, when we desaturate it, is going to be very, very close to this value of gray. So what the blend modes do is they look at the value of the layer, and then they do something, and it tells them how to interact with the layer below it. What it does is dependent on what you want it to do. Now, in your downloads, I've included a list of blend modes for Procreate, and in the far left-hand side of this list, I've included what these categories do. So let's go ahead and take a look at the categories. If we open up any layer, we've got darken categories, lighten, contrast, difference, and color. So here we can go through and decide exactly what we're doing. If the desired effect is for us to darken it, we could hit multiply. If you wanted to lighten it, we would hit lighten. You get the idea. So now let's go ahead and work in the grays right now. We're going to go ahead and we're going to hit multiply on the gray layer. Now, what just happened? Notice how with multiply on, the blacks are black, but the whites have all but disappeared. It's all shades of gray. Now, on your downloads, in the far right-hand column, there's an equation. You'll see that for multiply, A multiplied by B. So it took the value of the A layer, multiplied it by the value of the B layer, and then that's what it did to the layer. Multiply modes are super good for shading and shadows. All right, now, if you want to get a little more aggressive, I do a lot of color burn. Color burn is a lot more aggressive. It's like multiply's angry brother, right? So it leads to darker highlights and totally eliminates the whites. Yep, it is multiply's angry brother there. So if you're looking for an extreme darkening, color burn might be where it's at. Now, let's say that I want to lighten it. You see over the left-hand side of that chart, things that make things lighter. You've got lighten, screen, add, and color dodge. So you can go through. Screen is one you use for highlights all the time. Let's go ahead and screen it. All right, so now screen, you see that the black disappeared. You can go through and lighten it. Now lighten is the opposite of darken, and you'll see what it's doing. It's taking the value of the circle above, it's comparing it to the circle below, and it keeps whichever one is lighter. So it's totally non-mathematical, but it's still using value. Now, the alternative in here, let's go ahead and look at the contrast modes. Now, over on your sheet, it says, these make lights lighter and darks darker. Contrast modes are good for extreme ends of the spectrum. So let's say we overlay hard light, soft light. All right, you can go through and contrast, and you'll see that it will do things with every area of the spectrum. So it takes a look at where the dark is in relationship to what's below it, and it will make a decision in terms of what to do with it. The same thing is true with the whites. It takes a look at the white, and then it says, what am I going to do with it? So these modes make decisions. Now, the difference, these are like inversion subtraction modes. So if you've got two things, it will go through and go through exclusion, difference, subtraction. This is best illustrated by the apple and the orange. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll move those back to normal. We're going to go ahead and we're going to move the orange over top of the apple. All right, so now here, we had it in multiply mode. Let's go ahead and move this back to normal, and you see how we changed substantially. Now watch what happens when we hit difference. So we're going to go to exclusion, and it significantly changed the look of this. Difference, subtraction. Completely different way to look at it. Now with subtraction, it takes the top from the bottom and then reduces. So the value of B minus A. So that's how these modes work. They are very bold, and they are mostly used for artistic backgrounds. If you've ever watched Foamy the Squirrel, that's how he does a lot of his backgrounds. All right, now the last one is color. These are what we call component modes because they take the value of something, the hue, the saturation, and the lightness. So the HSL. And with those HSLs, depending on how you do it, let's say that we decide to choose by luminosity. It takes the luminosity from the active layer, which is the orange, and blends the hue and saturation from the layer below it, giving you that effect. Now let's look at color. In the color mode, it takes the color, the saturation, and the hue from the top, and then mixes it with the luminosity of the layer below it. So notice there that in normal mode, the white portion of the orange that's overlapping the apple was white, but as soon as we go to color, it takes that dark luminosity into account and changes it substantially. All right, so that's a little bit about blend modes. All I need you to know for the basics of this Procreate course is blend modes are a function of the value of the layer, which is its grayscale value, the position of the layer, which is which one is on top of what, because A and B matter. And thirdly, what is the desired effect or the desired behavior you want from your layer. All right, folks, I hope that was informative. And now let's go ahead and get on to something and actually use these blend modes because there is no substitute for working through the blend modes. All right, see you in the next one.